Well, is your internet freedom at risk? Russia and China are leading a push to give the United Nations more control over the internet. It's the focus of a key meeting in Geneva on Monday, and our next guest says that it could affect free trade, national sovereignty. Worldwide FCC Commissioner Robert McDowell wrote about the issue in a Wall Street Journal op-ed, and he joins us now. Commissioner, it is great to have you on because you wrote a great eye-opening piece on the issue that is at stake through a vote on a treaty via the United Nations. Tell us very simply, lay it out for us. What's at stake here when it comes to the internet and what the United Nations is proposing right now?
Sure. There's actually a subsidiary of the UN called the International Telecommunications Union, or ITU, and it has had domain over international telecom regulations through treaties over the past many, many decades. The last time we negotiated such a treaty was 1988, and that actually created the current deregulatory environment that we have for the internet worldwide. In other words, to keep the internet insulated from legacy monopoly telephone type regulations. So there have been several attempts over the years by a lot of countries, especially in the developing world, but led by the BRIC companies, Brazil, Russia, India, China, to expand the ITU's jurisdiction into internet governance. So that's everything from economic regulation of the internet to the administration of domain names like .com and .org and things like that. But also engineering standards, cybersecurity, and privacy, among many other ideas. And we see the effort this time much more organized than in the past, and the proponents of freedom, or opponents of regulation, if you will, being less organized and behind the curve, and that's very troublesome.
Well, you say this has the potential to impact freedom on the internet, the growth of the internet industries, and individuals using the web all around the world. Tell me what the United States' stance on this should be. You say that we can't just say no to the issue, that we have to be a lot more proactive here. What do you think needs to be done in response to these measures that get the clear support of nations, including Russia and China, which have a very different approach to the web?
Right. So traditionally, the ITU has operated in a consensus-driven way, but this time does appear to be a little bit different. Now, I've spoken to folks within the Obama administration. The State Department is supposed to lead these negotiations. The Department of Commerce, FCC plays a support role for technical purposes, but the president has yet to appoint a head of delegation or an ambassador of sorts for this negotiation, although we've known it's been coming for years. So the best thing we can do, I think, is to put the word out that a regulated internet, regulated at an international level, or really any level, is more detrimental to the developing world, to the third world, than it is to the industrialized world. Because a lot of industrialized nations, such as the United States, I would hope, would opt out of such a treaty. So you would end up with a partitioned or balkanized internet. And from an engineering perspective, that's really unworkable. The internet is a global network of networks without borders, and especially when you add the wireless dimension, it's even further without borders. So how do you start slicing it off or compartmentalizing it? So it actually would be detrimental more to the developing world than to the industrialized world.
Let me ask you, Commissioner, the Congress is proposing a various number of different legislative pieces out there, PIPA, SOPA, all these acronyms, basically trying to monitor the internet a lot more, because up until now it had been the wild, wild west, which has created growth and opportunity and money, but at some point it's also creating problems such as piracy. Where do you come out on the issue of that, of regulation on the web? Should it be as unregulated as it is now, or is it inevitable that we're going to start to see changes?
Well, there's a bit of a myth that the internet is completely lawless. That's just not the case. Antitrust laws apply in our country anyway. Consumer protection laws, intellectual property laws. If you're stealing intellectual property, you can't steal it legally through the internet. It's still illegal. So there are a lot of laws that apply. The internet is a tool, just like any other tool we've had in history. So we want to make sure that we can protect things like intellectual property, which you raise, but that we are not endangering internet freedom, that we are not giving governments the power to censor. And that's the balance that has to be struck with that legislation. But from the UN perspective or the ITU perspective, one of the other dangers is that countries would be surrendering their sovereignty to an international body. But it would just be detrimental to the economies of the developing world in particular. And also, keep in mind, let's look at some of these countries who are pushing for this. Some of them are not necessarily big proponents of freedom in general, let alone internet freedom. So there are a variety of motivations, I think, driving this, including wanting local phone companies, sometimes owned by local governments, to be able to charge maybe on a per-click basis for certain websites. And there's a view of the internet as being dominated by the U.S. as well. So whether it's Google or Facebook or AT&T and its long pipes, the facilities that comprise the internet backbone, a lot of nations in the world perceive the internet as being dominated by the U.S. But you know what? Facebook, Google, whomever, those were all software creations that someone could actually create on their home computer if they wanted, and they could do so in other parts of the world.
And so, global properties at that.
Exactly, and have assets all over the world too. So the whole world is benefiting, and the next Google could come from Africa or the Mideast or whoever.
Well, that is the beauty of the World Wide Web. FCC Commissioner Robert McDowell, big changes that could affect how the internet is used all around the globe. Thanks for bringing that issue to our attention. Thanks.
You bet.